Hi, welcome to Paint Draw Paint. My name is Ross, and today we are drawing boxes. In this video, we're going to explore drawing one of the simple forms, the box. We're going to learn some steps on how to draw a box, and then we'll observe some key structural details to help us understand how to draw a box more accurately in three-dimensional space. Okay, let's get started on drawing the box. First, a quick run-through of the steps. Start by drawing three vertical lines that will represent the three visible edges of the sides of our box. These three lines will set up the borders of the two front surfaces of that box. Space out those lines to set up the widths of those two front surfaces as you want. Here I'm drawing a cube, so I'm spacing the lines fairly evenly with some consideration for which side of the box is facing me more directly. I do this by placing more distance between the center line and a line on one side compared to the distance between the center line and the line on the other side. Next, draw the lines to illustrate the bottom edges of our box. We want to angle those lines to suggest a box is sitting on a flat surface. Then draw the lines to illustrate the top edges of the front of our box. We want to roughly match the angles of those lines illustrating the top edges to the angles of the lines we drew representing the bottom edges. Finally, we draw the lines illustrating the back edges of the top of the box. Again, we're matching the angles in which we draw those lines to some other edges of our box. However, this time we're matching the angle of the line to roughly match the angle of the opposite side of the front edge of the box. We don't necessarily need to draw a box matching these steps exactly. We can mix up the order in which we draw each line to suit our needs. For example, here I'm drawing all the edges of each side of the box before moving on to the next side. This allows me to focus on each surface as I draw rather than on the edges of the box. Let me show you that again. Here I draw each side of the box completely before moving on to the next. Alright, let's look at another alternative approach. Here I draw all the lines to illustrate the top of the box first, then I draw the three vertical lines that represent the side edges of the box. Finally, I draw the lines for the bottom edges. Again, we can mix and match the order in which we draw each line to suit our needs. As we practice, we'll find what's comfortable for us. Now we're going to run through those steps again to look at some guidelines to help us draw more accurate boxes and avoid some common errors. So what are some of the common errors to look out for? These errors are all distortions in perspective, or distortions in how the box should be viewed from one particular point of view. These distortions are usually caused by something being drawn in an incorrect location, causing a surface of the box to be out of place or warped in some way. In this first example of a distortion, the back edges are drawn at a too dramatic angle, causing the top surface to shift upwards and towards the viewer. The top just looks out of place. This next example doesn't take into consideration the relationship between the top edges and the bottom edges. The angles of the lines illustrating the top and bottom don't describe the box consistently. This final example has the same problem. However, instead of flattening the edges of the bottom in relationship to the top, the angles are now too dramatic, which distorts the shape of the two front sides of our box. To get a better understanding of how to avoid these problems, we can study linear perspective, or the linear perspective guidelines. You may have heard about 1-point and 2-point perspective. These are both linear perspective guides. The guidelines assist us in drawing realistically by helping us create the illusion of depth accurately. All the things we look at next in this drawing demo are related to perspective and connected to those guidelines. Alright, let's draw another box. Again, we start by drawing the three vertical lines. These three lines should be parallel to each other. We keep the lines parallel because the width of each side of the generalized box is the same at the top and the bottom of the box. And because we're drawing a box that is sitting on a flat surface, the equal widths should be illustrated at the top and bottom of each side of our box in our drawing. If the box was leaning away from us, we should adjust those lines a little bit by pinching in the lines towards an imagined center point above the box to create the look of a leaning box. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. For this box, let's just keep the lines parallel. We also need to pay attention to the spacing between those lines. The distance between each helps us set up the width of the box as viewed from the angle we are drawing it. It is a combination of the distance between these lines and the angle or the direction the top and bottom lines are drawn that allows us to illustrate how wide each side of the box is. Speaking of which, we can now draw the lines to illustrate the bottom edges. We draw two lines to meet at the center vertical line coming from the two outer vertical lines. I like to draw these lines first as they help me set up how the box sits on the ground plane. Again, our goal here is to create the appearance of a box sitting on a flat surface. One thing to remember is that the sides of a box are rectangular or square in shape. Both of these shapes have right-angled corners. So we need to draw lines that give the appearance of a rectangle or square as seen from the side. Or to put it another way, we draw each line in a direction or angle needed to suggest a structure made of right angles as seen in perspective. When paying attention to the angle each line is drawn, the line for the side of the box pointing more directly at us or facing us should be drawn at a flatter angle when compared to the angle of the line for the side of the box that is facing us less directly. It is that angle that tells the viewer how much a surface is moving away from us. The more dramatic that angle is, the closer to being perpendicular to our line of sight that surface is. For now, just practice sighting these in. We'll cover more about how to line these up more accurately in the two-point perspective demonstration later on. Next, we draw a line for the top of the box. Remember how we had just drawn the vertical edges parallel to each other due to the square or rectangular shape of each side of the box? We will do something similar here. The lines will be parallel, but not quite. They are close to parallel, again, because the square or rectangular nature of each side of the box. They are not quite parallel because of how we see each surface of the box in perspective. For that, let's move away from the box for a moment and look at one of the guidelines for drawing objects in perspective. That guide is, when objects are closer, they appear larger. When they are further away, they appear smaller. When we see two things of the same size at different distances from us, the one that is further away from us will appear smaller. Makes sense, right? This is also true for the parts of an object. The parts of the object that are further away from us will appear smaller than the parts that are closer to us. Let's go back to our box. We know that the front and the back sides of our box are actually the same size. However, if we could see the back surface from the view we are drawing our box, that back side will appear smaller. This is also true of the two sides of the box that we can see. The front edge of each side will appear larger or longer than the trailing edge of that side. This tells us that we need to pinch the lines in at the back. This will help us adjust to the smaller appearance of the back side and edges of that box. Again, we'll learn to organize these more accurately when we explore two-point perspective, but for now, practice lining up the two lines by sight until they appear correct to you. Once we're done, we're ready to draw the top of the box. All the same tricks apply here. We want to loosely match those back edges up to the front edges. The lines need to be roughly parallel with a slight pinch between the two moving towards the back of the box. Again, this is because when seen from a side view, the back edge of the top of the box appears smaller than the front edge. This time we're going to line up the back edges to the front edge on the opposite side of the box. Once we have drawn the two lines, we might notice that the back corner is angled wider than that of the front corner. This is because of the perspective pinch. Because of this, the back two lines are drawn at angles that are slightly flatter in relationship compared to the front two lines. Remembering this will help us avoid a common error. All right, let's do some shading. This part of the demo is really just to show us a finished sketch of the box. However, I do want to show you some simple shading to help us set up a simple light pattern. This light pattern is set up by shading a side of the box a different value. In drawing, a value is just how dark or light an area is. So we can pick three values, a dark, middle, and light value. We then shade each side of the box one of these values. These three values give us the look of a box under some sort of light source. This further helps us with illustrating the illusion of three-dimensional space or depth. It'll also set up the direction the light appears to be coming from. The darkest value indicates the side facing most away from the light source, often in the shadow side. The lightest value indicates the surface most directly facing the light source. The middle value indicates a side of the box not directly facing the light source, but still getting much of the light hitting its surface. All right, once we've finished shading each side, we have finished our drawing. All right, let's look at drawing a box from a different angle. This time, let's draw a box leaning towards us. Most of what we do this time is exactly the same as the steps that we took when we drew our first two boxes in this demonstration. The difference this time is we are no longer drawing the three vertical lines parallel to each other. We're drawing them pointing to an imagined point below the box. This, again, is because of how things appear within perspective. The parts that are closer appear larger than the parts that are further away. This time the top of the box is closer to us compared to the position at the bottom of the box. So now we angle the 3 lines a bit to represent this, but still pay attention to the spacing between those 3 lines to help us set up the widths of the sides of that box. From here, we basically follow the steps that we just learned to draw the rest of the box. We can even practice shading it using the 3-value pattern we just learned. To recap, we've learned the steps to drawing a box. We've also looked at how to draw a box accurately to appear within 3-dimensional space. Now it's time to practice. Draw a bunch of boxes of different sizes and shapes. Draw those boxes as seen from many different angles or viewpoints. Practice sizing the sides of those boxes to create boxes of different shapes that you might want to draw. At the same time, practice drawing the angles of the edges of the box or the directions of the lines that represent those edges to correctly show a 3-dimensional box. This takes some time to get right, so do the best you can, but don't worry too much about it. If the box appears off or wrong, examine it to see if you can figure out why. Then redraw it again, making the adjustments based off what you notice. As with anything related to drawing, this takes practice. Draw many boxes over and over. Eventually you'll be able to draw a solid looking box without much effort.